All right, welcome back to another episode of the Pressing Forward podcast. On this episode, we have a special guest, Emily Esposito, another former Wildcat as well. Can you let the people know who you are?
Sure. So my name is Emily Esposito. I grew up in Maine, but I ended up playing basketball at Nova for my first 2 years at least, and then I transferred to Boston. Um, and I just graduated there this past year, and now I'm doing my master's here in Arizona. So just a little bit.
Right, just calm. We'll dive into it a little bit. So when I say the name Maine Firecrackers, what comes to mind?
Well, you did your research. That if when I hear that name, it's like that was such a foundational piece of who I am. Um, I joined that program when I was in sixth grade, but the purpose behind it was so much more than developing basketball players. I think really that was a byproduct of what they did in developing people. Um, and like, I don't say any of that to be cliche. Like, I think really that program was built differently. Um, in how they started to develop young women, not only so they could play at the next level, but how they could develop as people and make an impact on the world.
Got you. And like for you, what do you feel like was some of the things that really stuck out to you in terms of like the things that they did to prepare you for more than
Yeah,
just being an athlete?
I think developing leaders. I mean, Coach Briggs, Coach Clement, the initial founders of the program, they were so good at building relationships with each girl individually,
Yeah.
knowing how to coach them. Um, as like many people say nowadays, I think some coaches struggle with that. They think everyone, regardless of who you are, just coach them the same,
Yeah.
you get the same result. But I think they were really intelligent in the aspect of they knew that for girls, at least coach, I remember Coach Briggs always saying to me, he goes, like, Emily, if you want to be a coach one day, regardless of if you want to coach men or women, he goes, always remember this. When you coach females, you go through the person to get to the player, which I
Mm,
think is so accurate. You want to build a relationship with them. Then they know you care, you trust them, you'll work that much harder for them.
right.
When you're coaching males, oftentimes you want to go through the player to get to the person.
Mm,
So you want to challenge them, you can talk shit to them usually, not saying that for everyone, but I think that is so the mindset of like when you're challenging each other. I mean, I've seen it with my two older brothers that that's usually kind of how it works. Um, Learning life lessons like that and being able to take it to the next stage of my life, but even things like um, when we would talk before practice, oftentimes Coach Clement would say a quote,
yeah.
but we break that quote down. What does it mean? How does it apply to you individually? How does it apply to us as a team? And how can we use it in our daily lives? And I think, I mean, that speaks volume to a program that, you want to build them as people, not just players.
And I think that's so important too, because I feel like you said, a lot of coaches can sometimes miss that aspect of like the true relationship building. It's like, all
Mhm.
right, am I just a player or you just care about me more than just being a player? Um, and it seems like you had coaches that really believed in you. Like, how do you feel like that really helps you just be more comfortable on the court and then just also just your relationship with your coaches and everything?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I feel like I've had, granted, I feel like if you play college or if you play sports into college, you've usually had almost every coach, every kind of different coach.
Right.
And I certainly have. Like, I've had male coaches, I've had female coaches, young coaches, old coaches, um, strict coaches, coaches that are oblivious.
Yeah.
I feel like I've had every range. I know, like from high school and AAU, I'm a very relationship based person. So for me, it was imperative that like I have a close relationship with the coach or at least someone on the coaching staff, um, so that I don't know, I feel like I can perform my best.
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
competitor, I'm going to go out there and do my best, but I think there's this like almost subconscious aspect of where you're willing to do so much more for a coach who cares about you and shows that they are there for you no matter what.
Yeah, that's true.
And I've gone into, like, I've had one or two coaches that I wasn't the biggest fan of, but I could always figure out a way to build some sort of relationship, at least pre-college.
Yeah.
While I was in college, I had three different head coaches in the span of 5 years.
Ooh.
Um, and like I had my first two coaches, I would say I had like a good relationship with.
Yeah.
Um, yes, I transferred from Nova, but I think there were underlying factors. But like Harry and I still talk to this day, or
Hmm.
he'll check and see how I'm doing. Or if I need something, I know I can go to him. And then I had Coach Mo my first 2 years at BU, and like talk about someone who is a player's coach, like personable, you a total open door policy. She
Hmm.
doesn't just say that. She truly means it. Like you can go in and talk to that lady about anything, and how close she was with my family, and same with Harry. Um, I think that to me meant a lot. It showed that you were invested in me and not just what I can produce for you on the court. And I think I played better for those people, um, because I knew they believed in me, as opposed to the coach I had my last year at BU, who we didn't really see eye to eye,
Hmm.
but like no one on the team felt like they were really seen more than a player.
Yeah. Yeah.
That just, for me, and I know other athletes, it's like, how don't you understand that? Like,
That dynamic.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
everything's relationship based.
Yeah.
Like when you get into coaching, you have to understand, like, that's what it is. It's two parties working with each other. Um, I think some coaches struggle to understand that. I don't know how, but
Yeah. And I feel like you can't focus too much on the one end of it where it's just like, okay, this is a player. I want to develop him or develop him or her as a player, and then forget that you're still dealing with a human being. You know what I mean? Like I think
yeah.
that's the part that I feel some coaches do miss. And
Mhm.
one of the things you talked about too was transferring. I know you probably had, your initial struggles. Can you talk about, what went into that decision making in terms of like choosing another school and things like
Yeah.
that?
Um, it's interesting for me because I went in, like, I know there are a lot of players that talk about the transfer portal nowadays, like,
Yeah.
oh, when I graduate, I'll be a grad transfer. Or some players, I've talked to players, like even recently, who they're freshmen and they're like, no, I hate it here, I want to transfer. So I will say, when I picked Villanova, I had always said, regardless of the school I picked, I never wanted to transfer.
Hmm.
My mom was really big in sticking things out. Like even in high school, when I wanted to go to a private school, and play for this team that had won 4 state championships in a row, she goes, no, Emily, if you want to win a state championship, you can win it with your hometown. And even to think about like my mom saying that to me at a young age, and she doesn't, she's not a huge sports person,
Yeah.
but I always remember that, and it still gives me chills to this day, because then we went and won two with our hometown team. But I think, going back to that, my first year I redshirted. Harry usually redshirted most his freshmen,
Hmm.
and I remember like calling my mom. I was like, Mom, this isn't for me. And she would always say, like, bring in the other factors of like, Emily, it's your first year away from home. This happens all the time. Regardless, she probably didn't even know
Yeah.
that, Sam, but she's always going to give me the silver lining. She's like, and it's probably just difficult. Like, you aren't playing this year, all this and that. So in my head as a freshman, I'm thinking, she's making some really good points, which she honestly was.
Yeah.
And then second year came around, I have the ability to play, struggling towards the beginning, but then you have teammates like Jana Tucker,
Solid.
who's gonna watch your back start to finish. She'll be there for you. She's like an older sister. Um, so I had so many people in my corner. And then it's getting towards the end of the year. I had the ability to start, but I always said, like, it was never about playing time for me. I even told Harry, I said, like, it doesn't come down to playing time for me. That's not why I want to leave. I go, I think there are certain things like the program morals, values, and ethics didn't align with mine at the time.
Mhm.
I didn't want to feel, I even said to our academic advisor, like, I just didn't want to feel like I was becoming a worse person while I was there.
Yeah.
Um,
And then,
looking, sorry,
yeah, no, I was just gonna, okay, you good.
looking back, I think I was a little immature in making the decision as quickly as I did.
Mhm.
Uh, I say that I think more because hindsight obviously
I was
being
about to say that's all
2020.
hindsight. Yeah.
Yes, you see everything from a different lens, and
Yeah.
obviously everything has played out. Sometimes I think, like, if I could go back and redo it, but I think that's my Achilles heel, is always wondering what if.
Mhm.
I think that's what happened when with transferring. Um, so yeah, I mean, I picked BU because I knew when I had met Coach Mo, I knew that that was someone that I could have a great connection with and learn so much from. But even in one of my interviews recently after transferring, I said, like, one of the main reasons I picked BU is because I knew Coach Mo could make me a better person, better leader, and better player, and in that order specifically. Um, and I think she truly did do that. Um, I just wonder if I could have held myself to a higher standard at Villanova and continue to play there. Um,
Gotcha. And so let me ask you this. Did you feel like any like initial like disappointment or anything like that when you first transferred? Like, did you feel some type of way about yourself, or how did you feel about that decision?
yeah, I think all the I mean, there's so much that goes on. Initially, it's excitement because, like, I stopped going to classes, I think my second year, like, in and out. I didn't understand. I thought I was just like tired all the time because I'm a
Yeah.
freshman, I'm trying to learn like a whole new routine, and you have weights, film, practice, all these different things, classes. Um, I'm thinking I'm tired all the time because of that. So I stopped going to classes, or I'm sleeping all the time. And then, like, you learn, like, part of that is like, okay, now you're seeing kind of the first um, or initial like symptoms of depression.
Depression.
I knew getting out of there for those reasons. Um, so initially I was excited, but the whole idea of like change and people not liking change, I mean, that hit me hard.
Hmm.
Over the summer session. Um, like, I got close with the team quick, which I think was huge for me in my experience, because again, being very like relationship based, but at the same time, like the disappointment of, okay, what are people going to think at home? What are people like who are really close to me going to say or think? um Disappointment in myself because I'm going from a Big East school to where I was starting at the end of the year, and now I knew the offense, so like things were headed in the right direction, to going to a lower major school,
Yeah.
um, where I was going to have to start fresh, and who knew if I was going to be able to play right away.
Hmm.
I think there are so many things that, play a factor
Yeah.
in the highs and lows of your first year of transferring. But I think with people being around you that you can trust, that was the biggest thing I was looking for at the time.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I feel like change for anybody in that regard is hard, right? And then you having to go to a totally different school, had to build new relationships. What did you find to be like the most challenging aspect of that whole process?
I think there were a couple things. I knew BU was a more academically rigorous school.
Mm.
I didn't
Then
necessarily,
Villanova?
yes,
Oh wow.
and I didn't love academics.
Mm.
I also hadn't been going to classes, and my coaches didn't really know at Nova.
Yeah.
Whereas at BU, our coaches were, okay, you're going to go to every class. Unless you're sick, you're going to let us know, or unless you have a note from the athletic trainer.
Yeah.
You're going to be in the first row. You're going to participate. You're going to dress nice
Mm.
and presentable when you go to class. At Nova, it's like you're running from practice. You're in your sweats.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And not to say one's right or wrong. It was just another adjustment I had to make. I think that was a big one. at the same time, I feel like it really pushed me. But I feel like the biggest thing was I had to learn how to advocate for myself.
Mm,
So, like things I needed, things I wanted, what I was struggling with at Nova, I was able to, the coaches could tell at times when I was struggling,
yeah,
but I was fine with not really sharing it. At BU, Coach Mo is so in tune with people. As she said, she can read people pretty much
yeah,
like a book, at least me. And so she knew when something was going on, that it was almost a way of like I had to force myself to talk about my feelings with her.
yeah.
Or the fact that she even encouraged me like to go see a therapist. I don't think I ever would have done that without her, just because of like the stigma around it.
Hmm.
I always thought I was fine. I just was like, I'm in a slump right now.
Yeah,
A slump is like a week of stuff not going your way,
yeah,
but a slump isn't just like feeling like shit all the
yeah.
time
Constantly, yeah.
and not wanting to do things, um, and understanding kind of the mind shifts that come along with that.
So it seems like therapy for you was a plus. I feel like a lot of athletes don't even like, I think either don't know about it or they just feel like you said, there's a stigma behind it. And what are some of the things that you feel like therapy helps you with?
I would, I mean, so much. I know that there were underclassmen on multiple teams that I've been a part of that I was able to confidently say, you know, when they were struggling with someone, I was like, I understand that it's extremely uncomfortable to really even think about the idea of going to therapy
Yeah,
and talk to like a random person. But I said, you also have to understand they are a great person to talk to because they aren't going to have a biased opinion.
right.
You can't tell anyone. So it's not like telling your friend who, when you're like, don't tell anyone, and
Hey,
then
hey,
they
tell
tell the
somebody.
next person they
Yeah,
see. Um, I think reassuring them in that way, and also saying like the first therapist I went to, I thought was terrible. Like she sat there crisscross applesauce. Why don't you just take a leave of absence? I go, this is not how college athletics works.
yeah,
Like that's not, you don't take like a month off and then come back to the team and like, hey, I'm back. All right,
yeah.
let's
It's not how it
pick up
works.
where we left off. So it was finding someone who also understood like how student athletes operate.
Mhm.
So um, I've always said to underclassmen ever since I've been an upperclassman and ever since I've gone to therapy is it also like it doesn't have to work with the first person. It's still about finding that like initial connection you have with someone. And I just remember I even wrote about it in one of my testimonials, but it was all about I thought all my worth revolved around basketball.
Mhm.
Um, I thought that was the only thing that I was decent at and that I had to offer. So I think when you cling to something so tightly, if anything shakes that, then you're just so unstable.
Yeah,
It's like always being tied to the worth of your last performance,
yeah,
um, which obviously you never know how that's going to go. But I think what really changed my mindset is I think it was honestly the first session I went to um, my second therapist, and he said, "So, like, what are some hobbies you have, or what are some things you enjoy to do or enjoy doing?" And I was like, "Hobbies? I'm like, I like being outside.
yeah.
I." He goes, "No, Emily, like things you enjoy doing outside of basketball." And like I sat there and I think about it now and I'm like, Emily, how didn't you just answer the question? Like things you like to do other than basketball.
Yeah.
And I go, I don't know. I'm not really like very good at anything else. I don't know what I would pick. He's like, Emily, I'm asking you what your hobbies are and what you enjoy doing, not what you're good at. He goes, to have hobbies does not mean you have to be good at them.
Mm,
Like, how do you start anything if you're not like if you're do you start everything and you're great at it?
yeah, no.
Immediately when he said that, it was like a shifted mindset of no, you like if you want to like draw something, draw it, even if it's the worst thing ever. If you want to try and be a photographer and you take awful pictures, whatever, like at least you're finding new passions.
Right.
It's almost like a checklist of like, okay, do I like this? Yes. Do I not like this and I'm terrible at this? Yes. Do I like this and I'm terrible at this? Yes. So
Yeah.
like finding new hobbies, um, that really challenged me. And then at the same time, I would say the other biggest lesson that I learned from him was I'd always go in there and I'd be like, I don't understand why I'm feeling this way. Like I have the fact that I even have a full scholarship to play a sport that I grew up loving. How can I be in here complaining? How can I like have a bad attitude? Or, and I never used this word because I hated it. And again, the stigma, but like, how could I be depressed?
Yeah.
I was like, that's like, I'm too privileged to be able to say that.
Yeah.
You can't look at it that way. Like, otherwise, it's always a spiral.
Mm.
He's like, everyone has things that are worse, that are better, but you have to understand that, like, it's not in comparison. You aren't comparing traumas, you aren't comparing upbringings.
Mm.
If it's hurting you and you're struggling with it, then why does it matter what someone else has going on? If it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that was a really big thing to at least stop me from a spiral mindset of, okay, well, I feel bad. Well, why do I feel bad? I shouldn't feel bad. And then it just is something that keeps going. Um, I think those are the two biggest things that I probably took away from therapy.
And one of the things, just even from hearing you speak, it seems like the identity part for you, in terms of just trying to find yourself, like soul searching for you. Um, like when did um empowerment come in mind? Like, how did any of that experiences or anything you learned from that, when did that sort of shape you into um feeling like you want to start that?
Yeah, I would say halfway through my first year being at BU, it wasn't even like necessarily empowerment, but just more so of like, okay, how could I help athletes who have been in my situation, um, or who possibly might go through a similar situation, whether it's transferring, whether it's struggling with mental health, whether it's any struggles, honestly, that come from being a student athlete, understanding that not everything is tied to your identity as an athlete. Um, so I think there were thoughts of it and I didn't know how to go about it. But again, I think that idea crept in of like, well, okay, all I am is a basketball player. So I just need to like be good at that. And then like maybe tell little kids at camps that, you know, okay, you're so much more and all this and that. But it was like after a while, I started, no, I'm like, how can you make more of an impact and use some of those other passions that you have? Because you do have other passions. You've just been so honed in on basketball that it's not necessarily completely clear. Um, but I think I would say second year at BU, it was in one of my communication classes that we had to write blogs. And I just started writing about my experience. And I had one of my teammates just read through it so she could edit it. And she was like, Emily, this is like, I think this could really help people. And I go, what do you mean? Like, this is just like parts of my story that I was frustrated with. So it helps to get it out. She goes, no, I think people could really relate to this and it would be helpful. And after she said that, I was like, I just had never heard anyone speak of anything that I had written. Now, granted, I had never put myself out there like that.
Yeah.
So I never knew how anyone was going to respond to it. So I think once I did that, it gave me the confidence to be like, okay, how can we build this out? So it initially just started with blogs. And then when I did it on Wix, which is like a website kind of content creator app.
Yeah.
And then I went from there. So like, how could we build this website out? And then I started talking to friends and other people who had nonprofits. And I was like, okay, I want to make this something that is much bigger than just blogs. So how can we allow student athletes to, one, use their voice, and not have it monitored or edited, and truly feel like they can say what's on their mind
Yeah.
without being criticized? And then how can we also give them share advice amongst ourselves, because I think being a student athlete, and specifically one in college, you just have this baseline of understanding between one another,
Yeah.
like what it takes to get there, what it takes when you're there, and kind of understanding that you're all going to have those days of like, I want to quit, or
Hmm.
uh, all those good and bad days, I guess. And then after everything with the mental health crisis of student athletes this past year, it was even more so a push to, okay, how can we get this active and launched quicker or sooner rather than later? Because clearly student athletes need it now. And I've been a part of programs. I think there's a lot out there, and they always talk about the transition after college.
Yeah.
I think is great, and I think it's necessary. But like as you see from like this past year, some student athletes aren't even getting to that transition point.
That's true.
So how do we help them when they're in it, when they're going through it, and not just that survival mode that I would say majority
A lot of athletes are in
fall
that.
into at one point or another. But how do we get them so that they make it through, and they make it through finding like purpose, joy in what they do, but also more importantly, like who they are. Um, I think that's like the first step to setting up your transition after sports. So I think that's really kind of the timeline of when empowerment came to be.
I like that, and I think that's beautiful too, because I feel like I think something we as athletes don't realize is like vulnerability is a strength, and
Mhm.
especially because we're trained to like be so when we're on the court is dominate, or on the field is dominate, and I think to even be able to tap into that, emotional side and try to put ourselves out there, I think there's strength in that because other people can relate to that, like you said.
Yeah.
And how much success have you seen, or how have you seen that, the what you've been able to start up, how have you seen that that's helped people?
I think just when even when parents will reach out, or when I went back to my hometown this past summer and I'm trying to do a bunch of camps or even one-on-one trainings, I the whole thing I do is like using athletics as the vehicle that drives a much larger message.
Mhm.
So how can I impact this kid's life, whether it's a one-on-one or whether I'm coaching a team, in a much greater way? So like taking what I've learned from firecrackers, and how can I take that same holistic approach to what I'm doing now,
Yeah,
create leaders, rather than just good basketball players. I think that has been the biggest thing in my mind, as I move forward. But at the same time, like when you have that one like random parent that comes up to you and is like we love what you're doing. Um, is there any way like I can email you to get in touch about this, whatever? And I'm like, absolutely. I don't
yeah,
even know the person, and that's when I think I knew I was making an impact. And some of them aren't even basketball athletes, and that makes me even more excited because it's like I know that now they see there's something so much bigger in my message than just teaching them how to put a ball through a hoop. Um, I think, yeah, those are my biggest takeaways that I hope I'm giving to the next generation.
I like that. I like that. And for an athlete right now is maybe struggling finding their identity, trying to find their purpose, what would your advice be to them?
I would say take a step away. Some of the advice I've been giving to even my younger athletes is always know when to have narrow-minded focus or big picture thoughts. And I think when I taught myself how to do that, it's like having a narrow-minded focus when you have, as a student athlete, you have so much going on, you're juggling so much. How can you just really focus on this one thing that you have in front of you so you aren't getting overwhelmed?
Yeah.
At the same time, when you have this like daunting thing in front of you that you can't almost not focus on, how can you take a step back and have a bigger picture thought of like, yes, this is important to me, but like in the grand scheme of life, like how can I use this in a positive way? Um, and it sounds very basic, but I think when you really get that idea down, it's understanding more like there's so many more aspects to you than just being an athlete.
Hmm.
I think I truly started to understand that, or I I noticed that I truly started to understand that when I was done playing basketball. And like usually my grandmother, one of her things, she would always give me like, she would always pay for my gym membership. And she was like, in this past summer, like, Emily, what, but you aren't playing anymore. Do you still want that or something else? And I go, no, like, Graham, I still want that. And then I was thinking about it in the car ride home, and like, God bless my grandmother. She didn't
Right.
understand necessarily what she said or how I took it.
Yeah.
I think my biggest thing is like, I realized that I understood it when I was like, no, I'm still like, I'm worth a gym membership, to put it in like, I guess, basic terms, but I'm worth a gym membership even more so now. Just because I'm not preparing for like a game doesn't mean that I don't deserve to still have a gym membership, because it's bettering myself as a person.
Mm.
Like, I have this gym membership now, I'm preparing for life. Like, that's my game competition. I think as athletes, if you reframe things to yourself, it starts to make more sense, and you
Mm.
start to see life as your new game,
Mm.
as your new competition. Um, but I would say the biggest thing is just understanding, regardless of your last performance, just being who you are worthy of what you desire and deserve. And I think like truly believing that is the next biggest step.
Powerful message right there. I feel like, I don't know, you just said some profound things there. But yeah, just plug your everything that you have going on. Just let them know where they can find you.
Yeah.
Yeah, just let them know.
So I have my Instagram. It's pretty much all empowerment. EM, either underscore or dash, empowerment 23 for the Instagram. And then the website is emilyespositoempowerment.com, where you can also contact our website or our social medias and stuff.
Yeah, so guys, shoot her a follow, shoot her any way that you feel like you can help with that mission, do so. So again, I just want to thank you for joining me on the show today. I think, I've learned a lot about you, one, and I think the people can also extract some wisdom from your experience as well. So I just want to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.